Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Zamora, the Director of Community Outreach with Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services. Thank you for joining us tonight on week 2 of our 4-week virtual seminar series. I just want to do a few housekeeping items. If you have questions, this is going to be a participation webinar. So I just want you to click on the little hand that's right there on your computer screen. If you're on a tablet, it's at the top of your screen. If you're a participant, it is, you should be able to see it right there pretty close to what you're looking at on the screen right now. There's also a chat feature. And then what we will do is after you raise your hand, I will unmute you so that you may speak and ask your question. Thank you. And anyone can post some chats. Again, I'll be monitoring those. And so now I would like to introduce Jerry Delcourt, CEO of Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services of the Diocese of Sacramento.
Thank you, Nicole. Welcome, everyone. Glad you could join us this evening. I think we have a great second session going tonight with what does estate planning look like for seniors. Our guest speaker is Dustin MacFarlane. Dustin is a local attorney here in town, and he's known as the senior citizens lawyer. It's good news. He's going to cover lots of great topics. As Nicole said, it's going to be more of a conversation than a presentation. So last week we had a PowerPoint, no PowerPoint. Your participation is encouraged. When you have questions, as Nicole said, don't be shy, bring them up. Dustin is looking to help you. So without further ado, Dustin MacFarlane. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jerry, and thank you, Nicole, you guys for having me here tonight. I really appreciate it. Yeah, my name is Dustin MacFarlane. I am senior citizen lawyer. I spend my time trying to help primarily seniors get their estates and their affairs in order. And so tonight, like Jerry said, I'd like to have this be more of a participation. Interestingly, I have a 13-year-old or almost 13-year-old daughter who started 7th grade today, and this is how she started school. So I get to, you know, I've been doing these Zoom meetings now for a while, but this is the way of the future, I guess. This is how we're all meeting. So anyway, that's good for that. So I wanted to talk today about estate planning and just some of the basics of it and what it looks like for seniors and some of the nuanced differences that we'll implement when we're talking about doing an estate plan for seniors. So to get into that, let's just define some terms first. First, I want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language. So when we talk about an estate plan, that's really an estate is just the stuff that you own and the value of that. And so some people have an estate worth lots and lots and lots of money. Other people have an estate that's more that's smaller and more modest. If you have a bunch of debt, maybe your estate is actually owes more than it's worth, but the estate is just a legal term that means everything that you own. And so then we need to have a written plan in place so that we know what's going to happen if you get sick or pass away. When most people come into my office, they have one question or one kind of concern in mind, and that is, hey, when I die, or they don't say that, say if anything happens, which is code for when I die. So they say if anything happens, I want my stuff to go to the following individuals. And that's great, but let's talk about what's going to happen before you die. Because in this country, 60% or over 60% of people die in healthcare facilities, which means we're going to be kind of dead for 5 years before we're totally dead. And so we've got to make sure that we are in a good position to have somebody else or other people look after our healthcare, our real estate, our investment accounts, our property, our families. So there's a lot more than just, hey, when I die, give this money or this property to this individual. So some of the fundamental components of an estate plan, and you might have heard these terms before, but I just want to go through them with you again. Let's talk about, first of all, we talk about if you have real estate, if you own real estate in California, the recommendation is that you would probably have a trust. And there are different types of trusts available. And so most of the trusts that we have are revocable living trusts. So that means, and so they could be revocable trusts or family trusts or living trusts. All of those terms are kind of synonymous. But what that means is that trust is designed to hold and control specific assets. So when I say specific assets, I'm really referring to real estate and usually investment accounts or money. So because the trust does two things really, really well, better than anything else. The trust, first of all, it sets out a written set of instructions to know who's in charge of your property while you're young and healthy like you are today, while you're well. If you get sick, who's in charge, and then after you pass away, who's in charge. The trust also says if after you pass away, who's to actually receive the property. So a lot of people will say, well, I just want everything to go to one child, and then he's a good kid, he'll do the right thing and distribute out to other people and to the rest of the family as he sees fit. And I just think that's a horrible position to put somebody in. We want to make sure that everything in the trust is clearly written down and defined so that nobody has to make these judgment calls. So as we age, we start to need additional help. Probably most of my clients that I work with are over age 60, and a lot of those 60-year-olds and 65-year-olds and even 70-year-olds like my mom are helping take care of an 80, 85, 90-year-old parent. And so as we get up there in age and we start to lose either mental and or physical capacity, it's really beneficial to have somebody else be able to step in and take care of things. And when I say take care of things, I mean the simple things like paying our bills and balancing our checkbooks, talking to doctors, picking prescriptions, dealing with a landlord, or dealing with our investment property, or dealing with our tenants, kind of everything in your life that you normally would do and have been doing for so many years. As we get older, now it's very common that we need additional help. Most of the time, that's one of the kids that will step in, especially for single people. I see a question pop up here. So let's talk about, when we're talking about these trusts, we want to make sure that we have somebody who's in charge of these trusts. So I mentioned the term revocable trust, and we also hear the term irrevocable trust, especially dealing with seniors quite a bit. There's a term irrevocable trust. So a revocable trust is a trust that you as the creator, the person who sets up the trust, can change. You can change it at any time and for any reason, or even for no reason at all, just at your whim. These revocable trusts have the reason that they're revocable, and what makes them kind of their unique status is that you as the person who sets up the trust, you're called the grantor. You're also the person who manages the trust. That person is called a trustee. And then you're also the person who is the beneficiary of the trust. So, for me, I have 3 children. If I set up a trust, I am the grantor. I'm the one who created it. I'm managing my own money because I'm still young enough and healthy enough, and I'm kind of with it and can do it. So I'm managing my own money. And then as long as I'm alive, I'm the beneficiary. And if you think about who the beneficiary is, think if you rented your house to somebody else, who would receive the rental income? And as long as you're alive, it's you, it's me, right? Like if it's my trust, I'm going to get the rental income on the property. I'm going to get the investment income or receive the dividends from the investments. So I'm the beneficiary while I'm alive. And then only after I die do my children become the beneficiary of my trust. So that's a revocable trust. An irrevocable trust is a little different. An irrevocable trust, you still set it up, so you're still the grantor. You're still the one who creates it and transfer and puts your money and your real estate in the trust. But generally speaking, with an irrevocable trust, you're not allowed to be the trustee, and you're not allowed to be a beneficiary. We have to pick other people to do for those functions. And furthermore, you can't just change the trust. It's irrevocable, meaning you can't revoke it or change it or modify it in any way, shape, or form. So we do use these trusts sometimes, and primarily use them for seniors when they get really sick, and either, we're trying to protect their assets for some reason. We're afraid that a creditor or, a bad actor, a scam artist, or somebody is trying to take their money. And so we set up irrevocable trusts to put some legal parameters around those assets so that they can be protected and preserved. As far as which one is better, I wouldn't say that one is better than the other. They're different tools for different purposes. And it's very common that we may end up having somebody have both a revocable and an irrevocable trust at the same time. And they have some of their assets in the revocable trust and some of their assets in the irrevocable trust. That's a very common thing. So I wouldn't say one is better. I would say it's worth a conversation. If you're over 60, if you're over 70, or if you're taking care of an 85-year-old parent, maybe it's time to ask, should they have an irrevocable trust? What are the benefits of it? What's the downside of having it? And how will this strengthen or improve our lives if we actually get it? So I don't think that it's for everyone. And I'm 47. I probably wouldn't have an irrevocable trust unless I had some health crisis going on, or some other thing going on in my life that I needed to really lock down and protect the assets that I held. But as we get older, then those circumstances seem to be a little more common. I get calls every single day from family members who say things like, hey, my brother is taking mom's money. He's already taken, $10,000 or $20,000. So what do I do? How do I get that money? How do we stop him from taking mom's money? So when we get those calls, we're definitely trying to implement creative solutions to make sure that we can preserve that money. And that's really, really important. So when you're stepping in and managing things for your parent, you very well may put everything in an irrevocable trust, because you don't want that parent to be swindled or hustled or fall victim to some sort of scam artist. And I don't care if that scam artist is somebody on the internet, some scam caller that calls them 100 times a day, or one of the kids or grandkids. I don't care. If somebody's trying to steal their money, let's find a way to protect it. And so irrevocable trusts do a really good job of that. And here's why. The reason irrevocable trusts protect money so well is that the owner, so the senior who has the money, can't actually write checks on it anymore, can't give the money away, even if they get swindled, they can't go down to the bank and make a withdrawal and give that money to someone. We had somebody call in so these stories are real. I mean, I can't believe that some of this stuff actually happens. But so somebody came in a few weeks ago and said that his parent, his 85-year-old dad, was at Walmart just doing grocery shopping, had his mask on, rolling in, doing his grocery shopping. And he rolls into Walmart, and outside of Walmart, somebody comes up to him and says, hey, sir, I need some help. My car's broke down. My family's hungry. We're trying to get across the country, whatever. We need $10,000. And this old man said, just a minute, I'll be back. Went to the bank, withdrew $10,000, came back and gave it to the person at Walmart, who then got in his car and drove away. And that kind of thing happens more often than we'd like to admit. Calls on the phone, same thing. Hey, this is your grandson. I'm really embarrassed. Don't tell mom and dad that I'm in jail. I just need to be bailed out. Can you give me some money? Can you wire me some money? Oh, sure. So they do it. So an irrevocable trust wouldn't necessarily stop the scammers from contacting the senior. it just eliminates this. It makes it so that the senior doesn't have access to so much of the money and can't give it away. And if you think about, we're essentially hiring somebody else to look after and preserve that money for the senior. And so I kind of maybe went a little left field on that, but I want to be really clear that this is one of the major differences that seniors, one of the major needs that seniors have is they need help preserving what they have. I don't know who thinks that seniors get cheaper as they get older. Hiring caregivers, really expensive. Living in a care facility, really expensive. All the doctor visits and the prescriptions and the procedures, all expensive, and they need their money. They don't have, just slush funds laying around to give to random people at Walmart, scamming them out of 10 grand. And so these things happen all the time. So having a trust in place is a great way to make sure that you have a written set of instructions for someone else to come in behind you if you were to get sick or pass away. So the person who's in charge is called a trustee, and that person, the thing about being a trustee, so first of all, I would tell you, pick somebody you trust and just know that it's a ton of work. Being the trustee, if my parents, in fact, I know enough now that I told my parents, don't choose me. I don't want to be the trustee, not because I don't love them, but because I know how much work it is. I know how much time it consumes, and I know that my 4 siblings, my brother and 3 sisters, are going to be totally ungrateful at whatever I do. If I had to put my mom in a care facility, they would say, well, you spent too much money, you put her in a crappy place, or you didn't spend enough money, you should have put her in a better place. Like, it doesn't matter what I do, there's always going to be complaints. And I just, quite frankly, don't want to have that contention with my siblings. So I'm like, Mom, Dad, pick one of the girls to do it. I really don't want to serve as trustee, but I would say that you definitely want somebody who's trustworthy. And for me, my sisters are trustworthy. I'm not worried that they're going to steal the money. I'm just worried that they're going to complain forever and never let me live it down anything that I would ever do. So that said, I don't want to be a trustee. I kind of joke, you pick the kid that you're mad at, get them back for putting you through heck when they were in high school. So you got to have a trust. The trust ends up owning the assets. And if I were to be really specific or particular, I would say the trustee of the trust ends up owning the assets, not for his or her own pleasure or enjoyment, but for the benefit of the beneficiary. So remember, with a revocable trust, while you're alive, you're the beneficiary. You're the one who, so even if you're not the trustee, your money, your property still has to be used for your benefit. I like having the kids, one of the trustworthy kids, serving as the trustee right away. I think that is a great thing to have. So most seniors, when you come in, so people come in all the time, they bring their old trust and they say, oh, I want Johnny to be Johnny's my executor, is what they always say, which I know what they mean. So they mean that Johnny, their son, is the successor trustee. So if they get sick, if they get letters from 2 doctors saying that they're bonkers, that they can't manage their stuff anymore, that Johnny's going to be the trustee. And then it's up to Johnny to go around to the banks and the investment advisor and the insurance guy and to deal with Comcast and AT&T and SMUD and kind of everyone and say, hey, I'm Johnny, I'm in charge. And it's a total pain in the rear end. It's so much easier to do it while you are well. So if you're 80 and you have 60-year-old Johnny here, let's modify that trust so that Johnny is a trustee with you. We call that a co-trustee. And the reason we do that is you're there to tell the banker, hey, this is my son. He's going to be my trustee. let's sign new signature cards. Let's change the account so that he has access to all the money. Now, what that allows is Johnny to take care of you. It allows Johnny to pay your bills. It allows Johnny to write checks, to deal with Visa, to deal with all of the assets and the accounts that you have. It makes life a lot easier both now and, more importantly, when you get sick. If you get sick, that's really difficult. So, and a lot of times, and so it's what's unknown about a lot of this is that we're constantly fighting people like bankers and investment advisors. They're legal departments. Like, they're not even real people. They're often some East Coast office somewhere reviewing these documents. I don't know that they're actually lawyers. They just kind of are looking for, I don't know what, and we're trying to make sure that they're happy. To make sure that they're happy, it's a lot easier if you are there signing the paper with your son and having the two of you or the three of you, if you're still married, redo those signature cards, redo those accounts, adding your son on as a trustee. And I want to make a really important distinction right here. I don't want anyone to go to the bank and just put their son on as a co-owner. He doesn't own the accounts with you. If he's a trustee, it means he's what's called the legal term, and you can write this down, he has a fiduciary duty. Let me repeat that, write this down. He has a fiduciary duty. Having a fiduciary duty means he has a legal obligation to use your money for your benefit. He doesn't own it. It's not his. He has a legal obligation to use your money for your benefit. Whereas if you just take him down and say, oh, we're just going to put Johnny on the account, you've just given him 1/3 of the money and really given him essentially all of the money. And now, if he had any sort of liability, if he got sued, if he got a divorce, if he got a car accident, if he had an IRS issue, he owns that money. The IRS could come after that money, and essentially your money could be subject to his liability. So don't just go down and add him to the account. That is just the wrong way to do it. Go down and say, hey, we changed our trust. Johnny's a co-trustee. We want to change the account to reflect that he is now a trustee with us. And so you need to do that at the bank and at the credit union and at the investment advisor and kind of wherever you have your treasures buried. We actually end up updating the deed to the house to show that Johnny is also a trustee. I think this is something that seniors should be doing. I believe in it. I believe that seniors are going to need help. Now, as a 47-year-old with a 20-year-old, my oldest is 20, there is no way on this planet I'm giving her access to my money. That will just never happen. But as my grandmother, she's 92, my mom is 71, yeah, it's time. I mean, it was time 10 years ago. It's time to make sure that we can take care of grandma if necessary. Not me, but my mom can take care of grandma if necessary. So these are things that are in the trust document itself, that we actually change the trust document. People come in and say all the time, I have this trust that's 25 years old. Is it any good? Probably 25 years ago, the laws have changed enough. It's time to redo that. It's time to bring it up to date. And if you're old, one of the things we're going to do is find one of the kids to be a trustee with you. So trust, and sticking with the theme of trust for a minute, let's talk about what the most important thing you can do, or one of the most important things you can do when you have a trust. So there's something called trust funding. And I actually have an object lesson here because, I have kids. And so I want you to think of this bucket as your trust. Okay, and so the only purpose of the bucket, my kid's paint bucket here, but it'll do, is to hold specific assets, right? It's not, and so unless we fill the bucket up with something, it has no value. It's just an empty vessel. So we need to put something in the bucket to actually get the value and benefit of the bucket. So as you can see here, my kids use this for paint, so it got used for that, but today we're going to use blocks. So if you have a trust, you've got to put assets in the trust, just like you have to put stuff in the bucket. So this is your house, it goes in the bucket. This is your rental property, in the bucket. This might be your checking account. Make sure it goes in the trust. This may be a savings account, maybe an investment account, maybe, I don't know, some jewelry or artwork. Those assets need to be in the trust. The trustee is the person who carries the trust around, who is the only one that has the power to reach in and pull assets out of the trust. You need money for food or to pay rent, here you go. You need money to, go on a trip, here you go. So the trustee is the one who holds the bucket, who has access to reach in and take things out, and should also be putting things in the trust. And so funding your trust is the most important part of doing a trust. And I want you to think about this for a minute. If you go to the lawyer or go to LegalZoom or do whatever you do and you have this estate plan, you've gone to all this work, maybe you've spent a lot of money. If you don't fund the trust, that's the same as just carrying around an empty bucket. Like, what value does an empty bucket have? None. It doesn't do anything. And your trust is the exact same. You have to put assets in the trust. So when I say that, there's a very specific way you put assets in the trust. And what most people think when they say, oh, our house is in the trust, they turn to the last page of the trust and they look down and there's a schedule of assets and it lists 123 Main Street. And they say, look, see, our house is listed in the trust. I want you to tell you that is not funding your trust. I repeat, that is not how you fund your trust. The way you fund your trust is by going down to the county recorder and changing the title on the house, changing the deed, so it shows that the trust is the new owner of the property. And you're not done there. Then you go to the bank and you change the bank account to show that the trust is the new owner of the checking account or the savings account. And then you go to the investment advisor and you make sure that the investment advisor knows that the trust is the new owner of the investment account. And that when you get your statements from the bank or from the investment accounts, the name on the investment account, the name on the statement actually says, the Living Trust, the Smith Living Trust or Jones Living Trust or whatever the name of your trust is. That is how you put assets in the trust. If you don't put assets in the trust like that, then whatever's not in the trust still has to go to probate, which we're going to talk about in a minute. It's like the trust doesn't exist. So if you haven't been to the bank and you have a trust, you need to march down there with your big fat trust document, sit down with a banker, and in this day of COVID, like it's just harder, but sit down with a banker and say, hey, I want my bank accounts in my trust. I want you to change them so that they're in the trust. That's the only way to do it. In fact, I have somebody who works for me. This is a shameless plug, and that's her job. Her 40 hours a week, 50 hours a week, she spends going to banks with clients and making sure that the client's assets are transferred to the trust. That's how the trust works. So as a senior, you've got to have this stuff right. There is no just like hoping that it's right. You don't do this really to make this easy on yourself. A very common sentiment that I hear almost every day is people will say, I don't want to be a burden on my family. I don't want to be a burden on my kids. Well, if you don't want to be a burden on anyone, then make it easy for them. Make it simple. Set everything up beforehand so that when you're not able to do what you used to be able to do, someone else has to come in and they're going to be in charge. They're going to have to do everything. And it's only by being prepared are you able to make their lives a little easier. And so you have to have a trustee that you trust. And generally it's one of the kids. A lot of people will say, hey, Dustin, I have 2 kids or I have 3 kids. Can they all be trustees? I mean, the short answer is yes, but do boats have 2 captains? Do towns have 2 mayors? Do cars have 2 steering wheels? I think you see where I'm going. Please pick one. If you have multiple people, unless they're like conjoined twins that are always together and always get along, pick one. You definitely don't want to give the kids a reason to fight. The reason you do estate planning is to strengthen your family. See, I believe that we are here on earth to have strong family relationships. I believe that the bonds between parents and children, between mothers and fathers, between brothers and sisters, are some of the strongest relationships we'll have in our life. And I think that we can, as parents, we need to do everything possible so that our family doesn't have any reason to fight when we get sick or after we pass away. Having a clean, articulate, unambiguous estate plan, which is a set of instructions on who's going to do what after we get sick or after we pass away, it's incumbent on us to make sure that that is in as good of shape and as simple as possible. So having co-trustees, having kids serving together, having our kids serving with a step parent, it's a nightmare. Like it is a nightmare to have to set things up so that people, when they don't agree, we should sell the house now. No, we should sell it later. No, we should sell it now. No, we should sell it for $400. No, we should sell it for $350. No, I want to buy it. I want a discount. No, I don't want to buy it. I want to rent it. I want to live in it for free. I cannot tell you how many of those fights we've seen with family members who just can't seem to get along. And so you do these estate plans really for your kids, your family, those that you love. It's not for you. It really has almost no impact. I mean, it makes it so that your kids don't have to stress and worry as much. Oh, look at that. I've got the sunlight coming in from the west and coming through the blinds. So sorry for those weird dots on my face. So we talked about trusts. We talked about trustees. We want to make sure that your estate plan has the right beneficiaries. So a beneficiary is a person who inherits property after you die. And a lot of times it's really easy. 3 kids, 3 equal shares, like that's a no-brainer. It starts to get tricky when we have blended families and stepkids and kids that we are estranged or we've loaned a ton of money to that we feel like they've already gotten their share. All of those issues need to be dealt with and addressed. I promise you, doing it now is way easier than letting someone else try to work it out down the road. It gives kids reasons to fight and complain. It drives wedges between parents and children. And that's just not what this is designed to do. So we want to make sure, so I've been talking the first, 35 minutes or so about having your trust in order. Your trust is not the only essential component of of a put together estate plan, of a well-crafted estate plan. If you have a trust, you also need a will. Now, a lot of people will think, well, I have a trust, so why the heck do I need a will? Okay, so we have a trust. The trust, one of the big selling features that we have, the reason we have trust is that we get to avoid probate. So very quickly, probate is a process governed by the state of California where we have to go to court, talk to a judge, and have the judge approve the distribution of our estate to our family members, even if you have an only child, doesn't matter, to our family members after we die. It is painful, time-consuming, frustrating, and very expensive. We try to avoid that almost at all costs. So we want to avoid ever having to go to court. Now, if you only have a will almost invariably forces probate. Write this down. A will forces probate. The only time your will is effective or valid is if it is in a probate court and approved by a judge, a man or woman sitting there in a black robe. And their job is to find every flaw, every problem, just anything wrong with life and make your life difficult. I mean, that's really not their job, but it really seems like it's a lot of times. So we have a trust that holds our assets, but we still should have a will. So I just said, I know a will forces probate, but sometimes it's necessary. And so I'm going back to the bucket for a minute. So let's say we have our bucket and we have all our stuff in the trust. But then one day we end up buying our daughter a house, and we own the house. Our daughter lives in the house, but we forgot to put that house in the trust. We just looked out. We just didn't do it. For whatever reason, we just didn't do it. How do we get this house into this trust? And so the way we do it is we use what's called a pour over will. That's P-O-U-R over will, a pour over will. And the pour over will means we go to court and say, Your Honor, this house was supposed to be in this trust. Can you just put this house in this trust for us? And it will, when we go to court, we'll pour that house back into the trust so it can be distributed how it's supposed to be, how the trust outlines. And so everybody should have a will. If you have a trust, you also have a will. And remember that in your will, doesn't matter how many children you have, in your will, there's only one beneficiary. So if you have a trust, write this down, your will has one beneficiary. And the beneficiary of your will is your trust. And that way, we can make sure that there's no confusion, that the trust and the will never conflict with each other. So we have a trust. Our trust is there to control our assets, to protect us, and to make sure other people can take care of our affairs if we need their help. We have a will. A will is there just as a fail-safe cleanup provision, just in case we forget something while we're alive. And so then we have, let's talk about a couple of the other things. So we've got to have a durable power of attorney. And a very common question I get is, people say, Dustin, I have a trust. Why do I need a power of attorney? Or better yet, which I can't believe this happens, they'll say, I went to the lawyer. The lawyer said, hey, you have a trust. You don't need a power of attorney. Don't worry about it. Well, let me tell you, that is not correct. Because remember I said that the trust only deals with specific assets, like the house, like the investment account. The trust is fairly limited. It deals with the big stuff, assets. What the trust does not deal with is all the other financial accounts that you might have in your life. So if I were to go through my checkbook, I pay SMUD every month. I pay PG&E every month. I pay AT&T. I pay Comcast. I have a business. I have a car loan. I have car insurance. I have health insurance. I have life insurance. You get the idea. We have a lot of things going on, and you can't just call up and say, hey, my dad is sick. I need to pay his auto insurance. Can I have the balance? You think they're going to talk to you? You think that you could call your spouse's employer, say, hey, I just need to get a balance on the 401k account. Think they're going to talk to you? No. Never. They're never, ever, ever going to share any of that information unless you have written authority. I gotta get a drink here. I'm gonna take a quick.
Perfect. As you're taking a drink, Dustin, we do have a question that came in.
Okay.
It says, what is the annual maximum contribution per beneficiary to an irrevocable trust that can be made to avoid inheritance taxes?
Okay. So inheritance taxes right now are kind of crazy. And when I say crazy, what I mean is the limits are so high that it almost doesn't impact anybody anywhere. So right now, a single person can give away during life or after death about $11.5 million. And then that means if you're married, you can combine give away during life or at death about $23 million. So that's set to roll back in a couple of years, and it'll go back to $5.5 million but per person, or 11 million per couple. It's still a lot of money. So the way that gift taxes, so you can give away, today you could put $11 million in an irrevocable trust and have that be held for your kids, or you could give it to them outright. So we've heard for years and years and years that you can only give away $12 or $13 or $14,000 a year per recipient. But that's that's not the complete story. So the government, the way that this whole thing works, the government sets a small amount that says, we'll let you give away, and right now it's $15,000. We'll let you give away $15,000 per recipient every year, tax-free. No problem. You don't have to tell us about it, just give it away. We don't care. Well, that's great, except if you have a big estate, it really doesn't get you that far unless you have a whole mess of relatives that you're going to give your money to. And then I don't even know why you'd ever do that. So you can give away $15,000 a year. But let's say you wanted to give more than that. Well, remember, right now we have this, let's call it a coupon. We have this $11.5 million coupon, right? And I wish I had another object lesson. Like we have this coupon that's worth $11.5 million. And let's say I want to give my son $115,000 this year. So the first $15,000 is free. I don't need to tell anyone about it. But then I say, well, this $11 million coupon, I'm just kind of making a quick object lesson so you can see how this works. So we have this $11 million coupon, but we're going to give away $100,000 this year. So we're going to tear off $100,000 of our coupon. Right there, that's gone. And then we're going to reduce this 11 to $10,900,000, right? So now that's how much is left on the coupon. And so you can give away a lot of money right now. The standard, the basic amount is the $15,000 a year. But if you want to give more, I say talk to your CPA or your tax professional and figure out how much of your estate you want to give away. And there are even more creative ways to give more money than that for really wealthy people, but for us commoners, you know, I'm one of, you know, the great unwashed out there, just as normal people, that will more than suffice to give away what we're trying to give away to reduce our estate tax. I will also tell you that if we have more than, or we give away more than $11.5 million per person, or 23 million per couple, whatever we give away in excess of that gets taxed at 40%. So it's kind of an insane tax, but that's does that answer the question, Nicole? Was that okay?
I think so. If there are any follow-up questions to that, please go ahead and just put it back into the question box. Thanks, Dustin. Anybody else have questions? Feel free to press that hand button or the little question button that you have, or chat, and I will get it in front of
I don't even
Dustin.
see the hand button. I guess I can't raise my hand, but anyway,
No,
I'm talking.
ours is a little different.
Okay. Okay, so.
Oh, someone has a question.
Oh,
Oh,
sure.
Susan, hold on one second.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if I can unmute her. Okay. All right, Susan, go ahead. I unmuted you. You can speak. Oh, maybe she was just testing out the hand button. Okay, well, if she wants to come on, any of you that have a question, please unmute yourself. Just say, excuse me, and you'll be able to speak.
So I can keep going and go with this, but if you guys have any questions, I'd like to, address the issues that you have to make sure that you get some of your specific issues dealt with, at least a general question to kind of point you in the right direction. So I'm happy to keep going. I think we've kind of gone through some hopefully not in too much detail, but some essential things about estate planning that hopefully will be helpful to you. But Nicole, I can keep going or I can wait. Does anyone else have any questions or thoughts, or can we just keep?
It looks like Kathy has a question. Kathy, you are, I have unmuted you from my end, so just go ahead and press your microphone and then you can ask a question.
Okay, you talked a little bit about a durable power of attorney. And so what's the difference between, I've always heard them referred to as a power of attorney for various things like bills and whatever. And I've heard it referred to as a durable power of attorney for health care. So what's the difference, and do you need both?
So first, you do need both. Durable is a legal term. It means that the power of attorney is in effect even if you become incapacitated. So I don't know where or when you would actually use this. It's really not used very often, just to have a power of attorney that's not durable, but maybe like at a bank or something. But a power of attorney is used for financial transactions. A durable power of attorney just means that power of attorney will be in effect even if you lose mental capacity and no longer have the ability to manage your own affairs. Now, the healthcare power of attorney, that in California we call an advanced healthcare directive. A lot of people think of the advanced healthcare directive as the person selecting the person to pull the plug when you and for life-ending decisions, but really that advanced healthcare directive nominates an individual to be in charge and manage your healthcare for I said this in the beginning, for the 5 years before you're totally dead, when you're just kind of dead. So you definitely need both. And with a rare exception with the advanced healthcare directive, powers of attorney end at death, which is another reason I like trusts more than powers of attorney. Powers of attorney, write that down. All powers of attorney, whether it's a general power of attorney or a regular power of attorney, or an advanced healthcare directive, which is the same thing as a healthcare power of attorney, they all end at your death. And so if you have a power of attorney and your child is paying your bills using your power of attorney and you die, that child will no longer be able to act on your behalf. Does that answer your question?
And Kathy, go ahead. You can speak, and then after, sorry.
Yes, it answers it. Thank you.
So yeah, everyone needs both. It is crucial. I mean, I would say, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Steve, you may go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Dustin. I wonder if you might comment on like LegalZoom, online sort of boilerplate services for preparing estate plans? I know it's kind of like asking a barber if you can cut your own hair.
No, no, I think there's a place for it. And so a very common, I just don't think it's for everyone though. So so I always say, I mean, there are some things that might be, things we could do ourselves. And I think Home Depot has taught us that we're all expert plumbers and carpenters and electricians. And heaven knows I've tried to sweat pipes and have failed miserably. But the online documents, the problem is that there's kind of three groups of information. The first group of the first information is things we know, right? We know who we are, we know who our kids are, I mean, things we know that we know. Then the second things are, there's things that we know that we don't know. Like there are some things I just understand that I can't do, or I don't comprehend, or I'm not good at. But then there's this vast majority, like 80% of estate planning rules, which are things we don't know that we don't know. Like we're just completely unaware of and oblivious and naive about a lot of the technical rules regarding estate planning. And so when you end up going through those interviews on whether it's LegalZoom, or you can actually go to Office Depot and buy a CD if your computer still accepts CDs, and do a trust for $40, right? But there's going to be questions that you don't understand. There's going to be things that you don't know, like the downstream consequences. And then what's worse is there's going to be better ways to do it that you just didn't even know to ask about. It wasn't a question box. It wasn't offered. It wasn't part of the package. And so you just don't even know what you're not getting. I mean, I don't even, maybe the analogy is, have you ever been to a restaurant and you order the same thing and you've been there a couple of times, then one day you look over at somebody at the table next to you. Remember when we used to go to restaurants, at the table next to you, and you're like, holy cow, I didn't even know they had that. I would have gotten that. And that's kind of how I think about LegalZoom. For some people who are, and when I say simple, I'm going to define what simple is. You're single or even married to the same person for 100 years, right? No, not a blended family. You have limited assets, like a house and $100 in the bank. And you have one child who has no siblings to fight with. And that's kind of simple. And I might say, okay, well, spend the $800, do a Zoom estate plan. But even in that scenario, a Zoom doesn't offer trust protectors, disability panels, asset protection trusts for your child, decanting provisions to change the trust after you die if necessary. It doesn't offer enhanced durable powers of attorney. It doesn't offer enhanced healthcare directives. It doesn't offer HIPAA authorization forms, I mean, there's so many other things. Plus, then it doesn't go to the bank and change the title. It doesn't go to the title company and change the title, or the county recorder's office. So there's still a lot of legwork that you have to do. Sorry, that was a long answer to a short question, but I think they're okay. It's better than not having it usually, but I don't think it's for everyone.
We do have, thank you, Steve. I hope Dustin was able to answer your question. Susan, I have now unmuted you. I can see that your mic is green. Would you like to try to ask your questions? Okay, I have two questions from Susan then. First question, I have a pay on death at the bank, transfer on death for house and beneficiaries on my 401k. I decided I don't need a trust. I've been told I can avoid probate with all these in place. Is that true?
Yeah, that is true. So first of all, 401ks and IRAs, they're never part of the trust, almost never. So they have to have beneficiaries on them. Secondly, the pay on death or transfer on death, remember that that's only good if you die. So I always tell clients when they ask me, you know, does that good enough? I'll say, okay, if you promise me, I mean, you have to promise that you're not going to get sick, that you are not going to need long-term care, that no one is ever going to need to sell your house while you're alive, and that your kids are not going to ever fight, and that we won't need any sort. They're not going to get divorced. They're not going to have a lawsuit. They're never going to have any financial problems after you're gone. If you promise me that, then I think the pay on death is sufficient. But the problem is that the pay on death doesn't come into effect until after you're dead. And it's very, very, very common for for family to need to access assets while you're alive, to sell a house, to liquidate an IRA, to do these other things while you're alive. And so I think that the goal is bigger than just avoiding probate. Like, I think that avoiding probate's really easy to do. So we can do that, but what else can we do to make sure that you're protected, your children have no reason to fight with each other, that the estate flows smoothly both while you're alive and after you're dead? And yes, avoiding probate is always a factor, but I think there's just other things that we want to accomplish as well.
Thank you. And in the interest of everyone's time, it is 6:57. Jerry, do you want to go ahead and pop back in?
Yes, thank you, Nicole. Dustin, that was really a lot of information, a lot of great information, and it feels like we can go on for probably a couple more sessions. I'm sure you're willing to agree with that.
No, I'm just getting warmed up. Let's get going here. Come on.
I could tell. I could tell. You know, it's one of those where for all of our guests who are here, there's so much information, and all of it is really so specific to you. And the advice that I think I would share, and hopefully Dustin, you agree, is that ask the questions. You know, start the conversation. Whether it's Dustin, whether it's someone else that you trust, the important part is really to start the conversation, to make sure you have a plan that works for you, a plan that works for your family, something that protects you, that protects everything that you've worked for throughout your life. So Dustin, on behalf of Catholic Funeral and Cemetery Services, thank you. For all our guests, I want to remind you that next week, next Thursday, same time, 6 o'clock, we are going to be featuring Beth Noseworthy. She works with Live Well at Home, and she's going to be talking about when is the right time for help at home. They're a division of Eschaton. I think I actually seen them running some commercials, and it's really kind of intriguing. It's sort of a hard question to ask, and I'll tell you, it's one that I'm particularly interested in because my mom, who's 92, is at that point. You know, we're starting to ask the question of when is the right time. So I'm really curious. Hopefully you'll be able to join us. So Dustin, thank you again. Nicole, thank you for setting it and being our hostess. Good night, everyone, and we hope to see you next week. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.